Hi there, my name's Alex, and I just spent the last month building a game jam project in Godot. I wanted to make a short video series to talk through how the game was made because I think it's a interesting little game and I'd like to share how it was put together. I built the project on a team of 4 people, so me as a programmer, another programmer, an artist, and a writer, and we built it for the Metroidvania Game Jam 13. The game jam lasted for a month, and we all worked on it like part-time around our jobs and such. The game ended up having a playtime of roughly an hour if you didn't know where you were going, and maybe 15 minutes if you knew where to go and what to do. The game was ultimately roughly 5,000 lines of code and had maybe 100 art assets between 3D models and textures. The game itself is called Tombworld. It's a 3D Metroidvania game in the ilk of something like Metroid Prime, where you go from room to room, exploring a spider web of different spaces, and using items you find on one branch of the web to go back and then enter a different branch of the web. So you slowly spiral outward from where you start and discover more and more of the world, and learn more about the world as you go. This video is broken up into 3 separate YouTube videos. The first one is going to be a walkthrough of the game, where I play through the game and I talk through the design decisions we made as we built the game. The second part is going to be a code review, starting with an overview of the overall architecture of the project, and then diving into a couple of high-level features. And the third video is going to be a second code review where I dive into yet more features, and I'm going to wrap up by talking about the Blender side of things and how the 3D assets were made and imported. So depending on what you're looking for, you might want to skip different parts of this video and you'll probably be perfectly fine. If you want to see a playthrough, if you're just looking for how do I beat a certain level, then use the first video, jump to the part you want to see, and just watch me progress and you'll see how to get through the game. If you're looking for how to architect a bigger Godot project like this, then the beginning of the second video, where I talk about the overall architecture, is going to be the place for you to go. And if you're looking for implementation, if you're trying to get into Tombworld's code base proper and you want to understand how things are laid out, then the whole coding section of the video is going to be relevant to you. And if you just care about a certain feature, if you're trying to figure out how to make pathfinding actually work in the Godot engine, you can jump to that part of the video. Or if you're trying to import assets from Blender and having trouble, jump there. If you want to make assets that kind of look like the assets we made, that's somewhere else. So all these different minor features are touched on somewhere in the video series. So as long as I can figure out how to use YouTube's different video playlisting features, I'm going to make this a playlist of 3 videos, and I'll try to break out each video with timestamps in the description so you can jump to the different parts of the video that are interesting to you. So really, this is 3 hour-long videos, but they're actually 5-minute little segments, so you can just jump where you need to go and learn what you'd like to learn. And with that, I think I'm going to jump into the playthrough aspect of this game. Starting right up. This is the Godot game engine. We're just going to be running it through the debugger because we can. Like I said before, this game is called Tombworld, spelled variably tomb or tomb. Once we realized it was pronounced the same as Doom, the whole game turned into a terrible joke. But let's get going. On the home screen, I did put a volume meter because I don't want to deafen people right off the bat. And there's link to credits because we're obligated to include credits for some of the music that we used. Quit is a button, start's a button. I'll point out how to make buttons later, but really, you just Google how to make a button in Godot. Anyways, starting the game, I have 2... The game always has 3 save slots, just kind of kept things simple for us. And so you just choose an empty slot to go. So I've clicked it. The game starts off, you're in your ship, you've just landed on the planet Necrolius, and you get some dialogue right away just to orient you. We've arrived. I explain the controls. This is really just because the only way I have to communicate with the player is through messages from the ship, so a lot of tutorializing gets jammed into these dialogues with your ship, but your ship is talking to you and explaining the buttons. Let's see. And I do straight up put spoilers into this first message. I'll show you why in a second. I'm explaining controls for abilities you haven't unlocked yet. Because if you pause the game by pressing escape, you can actually see logs of all your previous dialogue. So if you ever forget the controls, they're going to be right here for you, and you can kind of see them again. That's helpful. I hope it's helpful. I don't know. Well, we're on the pause menu. Just really quickly, I'll address the volume is available again. I show you all the guns you've unlocked down here, which I think it's nice to, as a programming exercise, it's nice because I have to represent the same data in multiple places throughout the game. And for the player, I think it's nice because you get a constant reminder of the progress you've made, the number of health tanks you've unlocked, the number of artifacts you've found, the guns you've unlocked. And yeah, then you've just landed on Necrolis, you're in your ship, you can kind of see out the window to the world around you, and as you leave the ship, you're going to get hit with one more intrusive dialogue. And this one is actually introducing the lore, which is, it exists. All these dialogues got added in the last, 2 days of development, so they're a little bit... We did our best. But yeah, this is explaining that you've lost your memories, but you are a bounty hunter, and you're on Necrolis, working for the Tomb Inspectors Guild to inspect why there's coffins being brought to this world, something like that. And right outside of your ship, we have a save station, as well as a vending machine where you can cash in your artifacts. If you pull out your scanner, you can scan different things in the environment. So, scanner. But when your crosshair turns blue, that means you can scan. So, zoop, scan, and it's going to explain how this item works. I think the scan time is too long, but never went back to make it shorter. And then there's save stations. Hit E, saves. It's great. Now if you were to reload, we'll pop right back to where we were. And all of our logs will be the same. All our weapons will be the same. I'll point out how I did that later when we're reviewing code. Anyways, we've landed on this plateau. I tried to kind of lay out the level such that there's a clear path to that building over there, which is really where you need to go to progress. But to reward people who are bored, there's also, you can scan the trees for some more dialogue. But more importantly, there's a hidden health drop here. Hit E to pick it up, and you get another health tank. Cool. This wasn't the first stage that we made, but it was the first, in-game stage that we made. So it's kind of my first time experimenting with Blender, really, and trying to put together a level, which means there's some very weird stuff where this whole building is, the same mesh as the ground below it, and that's janky. Also, some pretty bad vine textures while I was trying to learn how to really, apply textures correctly. But other things look decent. Mike added the clouds at the last minute. Mike is our artist, and I think they turned out pretty well. Anyways, this is an elevator, so as soon as we step on it, we're going to descend into the ground. And there's this recall button here if you ever have the elevator at the wrong end. The way elevators work, there's a volume above them that applies the elevator's motion to anyone in the volume. So if I were to jump out of it while it's moving, it would suddenly accelerate away from me a bit. But as long as I'm in the volume, it applies its acceleration to me, and I don't really, glitch through the floor. So I can step off. And it only triggers on a very small point in the middle, but as long as you step onto it, your body is big enough to pretty easily hit it. It also, very importantly, has anti-bonk technology on the bottom. So if I were to summon it and it lands on my head, it won't destroy. It won't shove me through the floor. Anyways, we've come to the bottom of this large shaft into the tomb. And you might have noticed as the elevator was coming down, there was a slight hitch. That hitch was the next zone loading. So, and there's the anti-bonk. So when the zone loaded, everything behind this door appeared. And when I open the door, it's revealed to us. I pass through the door. When I exit an invisible area, the door will close, and the zone behind it will disappear. And none of the doors are very well, they're not quite sealed, so you can see that hole between the door and the wall, and you can see out into the world. But once I enter this zone again, it's going to hitch and then load the world behind it. You can see the elevator. Not exactly... I'll get into how the loading works and why that hitch happens. You would think throwing it onto a background thread might resolve that, but turns out Godot has other issues that makes loading massive assets in a single frame kind of hard. and I didn't resolve that in the course of the game jam. Anyways, welcome to the throne room. You come through the door, and we've got, you know, a little pool to break up the space, some statues, big king, or pharaoh, or whatever he is. You can explore the area a bit. So, you know, there's this, just, it's a door, you can't get through it, but that's just to tempt you for later. Got these vines hanging out, trying to give the space a little bit of feeling. Obviously, you can break the vases. And you'll find over here a save point again. For a while... Just freeze. That was spooky. For a while, these vending machines weren't in the level. You had to go back to the surface for them, but it mostly just annoyed people. So now there's vending machines where there's a save station. Anyways, come into the world. The idea is that you're going to come up here, see the pharaoh, scan it, get a little bit of dialogue about the world, and then continue on behind the pharaoh, only to realize your way is blocked by a gate. But hey, you can see there's a collectible beyond the gate, and you can see there's some more doors beyond the gate. So you've got like a bit of hope, maybe. Oh, also, the bullets spawn a little bit ahead of the gun. Normally they'll hit the gate and stop, but if you walk into the gate, you can shoot through it. I don't know what to do with that fact. Probably fix it eventually, but the game jam is over, so nothing will ever be fixed. All of these candles do cast a slight orange light, and it, you know, as barren as the level is, it does help to give a little bit of depth. The tomb is meant to look decrepit, so I tried to add some slight touches of like transitional clean tile, dirty tile, earth breaking in. I don't really know if it worked, but it at least breaks up these very repetitive walls. Anyways, eventually the player is going to work out that their only real way to progress is to go under the stairway and come into this room. And again, every E to open door is a loading zone. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. So there's kind of two paths. Left down this stairway, or to the right through this door. Player might explore through this door, but it's really not progressible yet. You need movement tech in order to like make it up this platform. I do know of a skip you can do once you can get up there to cut out like half the game, but it's hard and I can't do it. I've only ever seen other people do it, so I didn't fix it. Also, it was discovered after the game jam ended again. So you come this way, you come down the stairs, you're going to find that there's this door you can't get to because it's blocked by a green wall. Please ignore the fact that the green wall just broke. This green wall is particularly glitchy. So you come this way, but you're going to see an enemy and you might be repulsed initially. There's another doorway. If you look around a bit, you'll see that there's an item up there. Tempt you forward. And so there's a third option. Down these stairs. These loading hitches as you come close to a doorway are aggravating, but definitely there was not time to fix that. And you'll find there's even more enemies in this room. So ultimately the player is going to find their only option is to come this way. I don't know. This is the first time I ever built a 3D level, so like this layout is, I think it's tolerable, but I don't think there's anything really great about it either. So like weird like transitional spaces like this doorway into a bigger room, I wasn't sure how to like progressively open it up. Anyways, you come in here and like you find the room is like full of fallen pillars and flooded with sand and what have you. Can't get through this door. And this bot doesn't actually aggress on you. This is the first like real room in the game, and the enemy was here to give you a sense of urgency but not really hurt you, so it's the only enemy in the game who won't attack you. Anyways, you eventually need to realize you can platform up these pillars and make your way across, break some vases, and do this platforming sequence. You can also scan the enemy. Purple crosshair was meant to indicate a scannable enemy. These floating enemies are named Heather. The mummies are called Mummy, and there's a couple other enemy types who you'll see eventually. Anyways, platforming through. If I don't remember to talk about it, the way I made these chains is cool and kind of changed how I think about development in Godot, so definitely I need to talk about those chains later. But platforming in. Go, go, These are just static bodies with a non-colliding chain above them. So the chain is just a way to like narratively tell the player why the platforming segments aren't falling. But I think they give it a nice chaotic feel as well. Anyways, we get up here, we get a health pickup. So now we're at 2 tanks. 2 tanks. Hey, and all this stuff works. So we're at 2 tanks. Anyways. We can kind of keep going. Another doorway we can't get through, so that's cool. Open the door. And hey, now we're somewhere we might recognize, because that's the back of the Pharaoh. And so we're through this door. We can collect the artifact. We can press the button. And now that we've got an artifact, we can go back to the vending machine, which you probably don't remember, but it cost 1 artifact to get through. This doorway is a bit of a bust. It does lead to an area that you're not allowed to access yet. And in fact, there's no reason to backtrack through this doorway once you make it through that area, because there's another exit to this room. Oh, I did try to be narratively consistent. If you look at the ceiling here, there's an opening to the sky, but whenever you see the sky from underground, there should always be like some connection to the fact that you are deep under the earth. So like, when that unloads, we'll see the ceiling here is, you know, dark and communicates that we're like in a tomb somewhere. Anyways, I am going to save and then, well, buy the gun. This is our next gun. It's called the 4-color gun, but it only has 1 color because of constraints. And there it is. You can shoot enemies now. Cool. So we're going to go back in here and again, this room isn't accessible. In fact, this is the last room in the game, so we can't get through here until we've done everything else. I won't come back in again until we're ready to finish the game. And yeah, there's that beautiful door way up high that, like, it's there taunting you until you have a chance to make it through. Oh, fun thing about the guns. They're pinned to the center-ish of the screen. So their location is based on the midpoint of the screen plus about 200 pixels to the right. So if you make the game smaller, they're always going to be at that relative point to the edge of the screen. When we initially worked on the game, it was at this small, like, you know, 800 by 900 size or whatever this is. And so I thought initially the gun should move way to the right when you make the screen bigger. But the farther it pulls to the right, the more obvious it is that it's, like, not quite lined up with the center of the screen. Which might be worth addressing. That, like, if you shoot at an enemy, the gun hits the enemy. If you shoot at a wall, it hits the wall right at the crosshair. So, like, the angle up from the point of the gun to the point the bullet targets changes based on what you're looking at. And we always know what you're looking at because we want to be able to show different crosshairs when you're looking at an enemy. And so we know you're looking at a door, so you can press E and open it, and we know you're looking at an enemy because the crosshair is red. And so depending on what you're looking at, the trajectory of the bullet does change. If you're right up against a wall, we change it very little because if it, like, pulled to the crosshair when you're this close, it's very obvious it's pulling in. And so you can actually see where that cut off, right? Like, right here it pulls to the crosshair. Right here it's not pulling to the crosshair. And that's just because it's too transparent what trick we're playing if you're right up against a wall and it goes, like, 90 degrees off the tip of the gun. Anyways, this is just a combat encounter. So I'm going to shoot all the enemies. Oh, enemies are always childed to a navigation mesh, and so each room that has a navigation mesh has enemies childed to it, and they're not allowed to stray very far from their parent navigation mesh, which is how we, like, leash them to a room. So that first enemy you saw out in the platforming room isn't allowed to go more than 5 units away from the edge of its mesh. So in this room, I clear a wave of enemies, then a set of doors opens and exposes more enemies. When I clear this wave, another wave appears. Tyler, who was the other programmer on the project, thinks that's terrible game design, and he might be right. But we really, just getting this game together in a month was about all we could do, you know, given that it's a hobby project and we all have jobs. And so, good game design be damned, this made another room worth of encounters for the player to enjoy. All these enemies are scannable. Oh, I was talking about nav mesh. So enemies follow a nav mesh, and they actually each have a behavior tree where they're alternating between shoot, melee, They go into back-off mode if you get too close. So he's just gonna... He might shoot, but once he shoots, he's gonna run away from me. So he's gonna back off. And then once he's far enough away, he'll choose if he wants to walk closer or shoot. And he's chosen to shoot. Enemies are scannable. I think I've said this, though. There is a bug that's pretty obvious that enemies' bullets persist right until the moment their transparency hits 0. And so they can keep shooting after you really think they're dead. And that also should have been fixed if the game jam was a week longer. There's a lot of particle effects for, like, damage and stuff. Not because I want, like, a bloody game per se, but because Mike, our artist, was kind of busy, and coordinating 3D effects for a team who's only ever done 2D before was, like, rough, and it was easy for me to just make a bunch of particle effects in Godot without needing any art assets. Really is the key thing. So, like, particles are a good way to make a game feel responsive without having to bug your artist. Or, worse yet, make art yourself. I definitely made quite a few minor assets just to fill out the different parts of the game. Just little things like the health bar, UI stuff. Anyways, this room also I tried to give it a sense of like reclaimedness. So I've got this pool of water here, which is just a sheet of transparency over a little hole. Okay. Oh, I would like to show mummies have 3 behaviors. They'll shoot, they'll stalk, and they'll melee. So he's going to slash in a second. He's in... Shooting happens in... There it is. So he'll swing his arms and do some damage that way. So shooting happens in waves for the mummies. They'll shoot 1, 2, or 3 times in a row. And so that was him doing a 3 succession shot. Anyways, clean up the last of these mummies and that final door should open. They do tend to get stuck behind these walls a little bit with their pathing. But compared to some other pathing bugs we had, that's like relatively minor. And the door opens. Great, so we can collect a new artifact. I tried to scatter candelabras everywhere just because the world can feel pretty empty. Then we can get in the elevator, head up. Loading hitch. Cool. Door opens. Oh, the doors are an asset. The doorway loading system was designed to be modular, so we could have all different kinds of doors for different zones. But like, it became obvious pretty quickly we're only going to have one zone. And so we didn't even get like a real textured door. This is our placeholder checkerboard texture. Anyways, we have a door. We can press E to open it. Well, there's a distinction. That's a door. Doors always block loading zones. This is a gate. Gates just like gate different parts of an already loaded level. You will notice when we come back into this throne room, now that we've cleared the first wave of enemies, a flag was set in the save file. I really need health, otherwise I'm not going to be able to keep playing this. And so that flag was set, and now enemies will spawn in this room from now on. So now we know you've cleared your first room of enemies, you know how to fight, and we are going to put just a little bit of like threat in this room to keep the pressure on the player. So we got one artifact down there, and now we're going to go back, because there is a door we haven't explored yet. Well, there's a few doors we haven't explored, because now we have the green gun, so we can knock down this shield, open this door, go in here, and we're going to find that this is the wrong room. We can go in here, we can fight some enemies, but ultimately, there's no path to progression. We're on the floor, there's a gate on the floor, gate to some save room. There's a lot of enemies up there, though, on the platforms, and we can't really, like, reasonably fight all of them. If you could kill all of them, this gate would open, and that would be your path to progression to go through the floor, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to kill all of them with the items we have now. So ultimately, the player is going to be forced to go back. Bit of a concession. These door shields are only on one side of a door, and they're automatically taken down if you come through from the other side. I would have loved to implement the Metroid Prime style, where both sides are shielded and you shoot to drop the shield, but that was something... This was any level sequencing stuff is pretty clearly added at the last minute to give the game some sense of coherency. Mostly this was building a series of tech demos that ultimately came together. There was another door up there that we could try to go through, but I'll just say it doesn't lead to anything right now. So this is ultimately our path to progression. And we get a bit more dialogue here, alluding to our lost memory and how, like, we seem to have lost our memory on the same day the creator of this facility vanished, which is, oh, quite mysterious and inexplicable. Anyways, we come into this room and you're going to notice it's, like, stylistically different from the previous rooms. We're platforming, there's, like, a motorcycle going past my apartment. There's this cobblestone texture on the wall, this mechanical-looking sheeting, maybe? I'm not sure. And, like, the room is a little more linear. And so this is our first, like, platforming puzzle room. The reason the game's broken out this way is very much, there were two programmers. Tyler was working on movement, so platforming, and I was working on weapons, level sequencing, menus, all that stuff. And so you'll see a very clear divide between Alex rooms and Tyler rooms if you're looking for them. But I think they work well because the Tyler rooms are these, like, platforming puzzles, and so they really feel like these little, like, diversions from the main area that fill out the game. So you come through this platforming puzzle. Should you fall, you're going to hit that lava, and there's checkpoints throughout the room that you'll just respawn at. You take some token damage when you fall, but really it's just meant to, like, put some fear into you and not actually, like... It's not... You're not meant to die in these platforming rooms. You're meant to be threatened a little. Anyways, you come over here and you're going to see this, like, icon you can E to collect. And you're going to get the glide ability. Cool, how does it work, you ask your ship. And it'll explain. Blah, 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 blah. I'll explain that. So, first, the level's progressing. That sinks into the floor. Some new platformers can come back. And you're going to have to use your glide ability, you know, prove your mastery to exit the room. So glide is on space. Space to jump. Space, and then hold to glide. And this is a Destiny glide, if you've ever played that, where the glide disables gravity. So if you tap and then tap again, you need an upward arc. If you tap and while you're falling tap, you'll just sort of fall through it. So if you want to get a bit of boost to your glide, you tap twice. And if you don't want that boost, you don't. And so I'm just going to do the puzzle. For a long time, the abilities that made it into the game are a small subset of the abilities we actually built. And we thought there would be a lot more movement abilities. So the key bindings for movement used to be a lot more hostile. At the last minute, we changed them to just put glide on, like, double tap, like you would expect if you've ever used a jetpack in a shooter. And it makes it a lot less hostile. The interesting problem, though, is it used to be space to jump and then hold shift to glide. And by having to release jump before you can glide, there's a moment where you lose your upward momentum. So jump, you release, and then you hold. And your jumps were just a little bit shorter. So we changed the key bindings, and then we found that we had to shrink up the puzzle just a little bit. All of these platforms got pulled closer together because your jump was that much shorter. These platforming sections are easily the hardest part of the game. This shooting, you can kind of, like, cheese your way through. Like, puzzle sequence, like, room sequencing, you can obviously just try until you fail. But, like, these platforming sections are really, like, pretty unforgiving. Which I don't know if is exactly a problem, but it's definitely a thing that caused multiple Jam players to drop the game. So I guess it is a problem. But once you kind of figure out the controls, they are not, you know, they're fine. Tyler makes it through every time, I make it through sometimes. Anyways, I collect another artifact, so we're at 2 artifacts. This doorway actually accentuates the problem with the loading bubble approach. So the way you open a door is you enter an invisible zone around the door, it loads what's behind it, and then when you go to the door and press E, it'll open instantly. The problem is, here, you hit a loading bubble out here, you get that loading hitch when you're about to platform, and it feels awful. So that would be a thing to fix. And we're going to come out here, and there's our friendly Heather again. Anyways, we've got 2 artifacts, so I'm going to go to the shop. So yeah, I'll say, because we're getting a little more than halfway through, maybe. Most of this texture work is mic. Bases are mic. Candelabras are mic. These statues, most 3D assets are me. So these statues were made in Godot using CSG shapes just to like fill out the level very early on. They never got replaced. The vending machine and the save point were me. The save point really is way overbuilt for this game and looks kind of bad, but it was the first thing I built in Blender to get myself like reacquainted with Blender after having not used it for like many months. And so like the save point walked so that there could actually be so we could run with the stage, right? Like I needed that practice building a save point in order to actually like build a map. I don't know. This railing is really a railing. You can bump into it. So I'm going to buy this. It's the slime gun. It's great. And then I'm going to save again. And now that we have the slime gun, we can progress. Oh, that door shouldn't be open. Okay. Yeah, if you see a door open like that, you almost just want to reload the game because it means some stage didn't unload and you might just walk into it. Like you might find that there's a stage here in front of you. Oh, let me introduce you to the slime gun. I'm really happy with the guns in this game, although they don't really get used very much, all things considered. So the slime gun here shoots pellets of slime. They melt enemies pretty quickly, but that's almost the less interesting aspect of them to me. When they hit a surface, they leave behind one of these little discs of slime. And if a disc of slime gets hit by a slime ball, it grows. This is more fun in a room where the floor is flat. So, it grows. And an enemy who walks through it is going to take damage. It does have an upper limit to its growth. And you can kind of do that on walls. And if 2 slime puddles hit each other, the bigger one consumes the small one. And if you leave it here for a little while, it'll, after 5 seconds or so, slowly shrink down. And so, like, it's a really fun... There's a lot of rules to the gun. Every time a slime ball disappears, it leaves off a single particle of slime. And so, like, you kind of get this nice, like, you can see it bubbling away. And if it hits an enemy, it releases a different color particle of slime to show you that, like, some damage has been dealt. So, like, it's a pretty communicative gun. The problem is more, its range isn't very long. The pellets feel weak, and they don't interact right with your jump. So, here's the real problem with this gun. You jump, you're shooting, you want to shoot below you, but the pellets drift above you and don't fall to the ground until after you land. And so it's really hard to, like, do that clever platforming thing where you get behind an enemy, douse them in, like, pellets of slime, and then they've melted by the time you land, because the slime doesn't catch up to you. So, like, there's just a lot in this game that, given more time, would have been more fun. Anyways, I'm going to follow the correct progression now. So, we come here, we use our green gun again to open the door. Going through the door, we will find this room that we've seen before, right? So now we actually have the power to clear the room, because in the description of the slime gun, it explained to us that there's some mushrooms around here that would love the taste of that slime. So we're going to slime the mushrooms, and they sort of like animate and open up and release these like particles. Again, particles are a sure sign that your artist was busy that day. So I can get on the particle beam and be shot up into the air, and we're going to see the stage. I won't survive this stage if I try to narrate and play. It's got 4 cubbies around the edges, full of enemies, plus the floor is covered in enemies. It's another fight, essentially. You're going to have to clear the waves of enemies, and then you're allowed to progress. And my throat's a little sore, so I'm going to shoot and then talk. This is one of the last rooms I built, and I think it's kind of almost beautiful. That might be overstating it. But I think it looks nice because it has lighting and there's this like progression of like an openness at the top to the balconies to the really like denser underfloor in a way. And I don't know. It's one of the later rooms, and it does have a little bit more like character because like you're here and you've got these different lines of sight to different areas. And I kind of knew how to fill out an area because I built the other ones. That's all. The combat encounter here is not actually very fun on the other hand. Like, I think the area looks nice, but practically, you don't really get to use your glide ability, which you've unlocked, and it would be nice to need that in combat. You do use the slime technically, but you don't really need it other than it unlocks your ability to fight the second floor enemies. And really, like, the optimal way to play this is to hide in the corner and snipe enemies, because you just don't want to take the damage. So you're kind of better off hiding and sniping, and that doesn't feel... I'm not trying to actually... Despite the game being called Tombworld, it's not really a ripoff of Doom, and so, like, I'm not trying to emulate their push-forward combat that... I don't know. I'm not trying to emulate that, like, always be running towards enemies mentality that they had for some of the recent Doom games, but it would be nice if I had pulled that off a little bit better than this room case. Anyways. There is asset reuse happening here, obviously, right? Like, the chains, the vines, these pillars are reused, all the textures are reused. Oh, minor thing. In previous rooms, the vines were part of the exported Blender file. The carpets on the walls were part of the exported file. In this room, though, they're just placed assets in Godot. And so, strangely enough, you'll notice the material is slightly different on each of them. So this material takes more light than the ones in the other rooms, and so they just glow more. Don't know what to... It would have been nice if I had gotten those materials to match. But I think players probably, by this point, have given up on the game anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, reuse of chains, reuse of cloud. It's good. This is a health orb. Enemies have like a 15% chance of dropping it. I'll point out how that's done in the code, but it's basically the simplest code in the game. And obviously that's what we call programmer art. It was my best recollection of what health drops look like in Metroid Prime. I think they should have been red in retrospect because all the other UI in this game is red. Oh, so hey, here's the irrelevant door. You can open it, you can go through it. It leads back to this room where the Pharaoh was here. That first gate we unlocked, our first little victory room. But there's no reason to ever go through this door. I just made the door in Blender and realized I had an opening that led nowhere, and so I decided to make that next room sync up with it. Oh, this is also important. I made a big pot. It's the biggest pot in the game. I thought it was important to have the big pot. Like the throne room, once you've cleared this room, when you come back, it respawns a different set of enemies. So there's much fewer enemies in this room. Many fewer? Much less? Anyways, when you cleared the room, though, the important thing is that this hole in the floor opened and this save point opened. You can come in here and grab an extra health vial, which is nice. You can save, which is, you know, enjoyed by those who don't want to replay half the game. And then you can go through the floor. Narratively, there's very little excuse why there's red light glowing from here, except that this is a poorly designed space, and finding your way to this hole was a little bit hard, so giving the glowing red to show players where to go was important. But if you'd like an excuse, it's because through this door is a room full of lava. So, okay, you can leave. Yeah, we fall down this shaft, come into this room. This is another platforming challenge. And it should look familiar. It's that like metal science lab vibe that we're going for with a new movement ability. This one's green. It's dash. Dialogue has jokes. Press shift to dash. In the air you can also press shift to dash. But don't press shift to dash if you're, you know, not going to make the jump. So you got to jump and dash. Oh god. Okay. This is a bug, sort of. The checkpoint system detects that you've hit that wall, and spawns you up there. But that time I used dash and I made it. If you're standing on solid ground, a last-minute fix allows you to press dash and just go forwards. But if you're holding sideways and you dash, you'll dash in that direction. It was meant to be good in combat, but level sequencing meant that you don't get much more opportunities for combat after this room. This room is where most people stop playing, unfortunately. It's a little bit too hard. And mostly it's hard because the finer points of dash are a little bit unclear. So here you have to jump and glide and then dash, and you'll make the gap. And here you need to jump, glide, get about halfway, dash, and you won't make it. I don't remember how to do this. Jump, dash. There's an interesting phenomenon. Right, I'm remembering. If you jump and dash, and you're midway through your jump when you're dashing, your jump momentum will be preserved. So if you're moving up, and you're not at the apex of your arc, and you dash, you will continue up on the other end of your dash. It's kind of subtle, but you can use it with glide especially to gain this nice little oomph in your dash. Right there, see how I rose at the end of that dash? That was the oomph. Now I know, because other developers can do it, that you can jump over this wall. But you can also dash around it. Oh god. Which is the ideal state of being, is to not get pillars of lava pizza. Pro tip though, release shift when you get close to a platform. Oh. That bonus rise. Yeah, so release shift before you land, otherwise you might take an extra dash as you tap the ground. Anyways, you can kind of bump platforms with your dash to get up on top of them. And here we go. So yeah, I'm going to use the bump dash technique here. I don't think it's entirely intentional, but it works, and at some point you have to ship the game, and it's fun, and you don't worry about it. Obviously, this room... I had worked with Blender before this. The other developer had not, and so this is all built using Godot primitives, right? The ceiling is a big box. The walls are scaled boxes. I think it looks pretty decent nonetheless. It does give a feel, right? We are in this basement lava field area. It's a little bit communicative, so I'm not totally against it. I think the worst spaces in here, though, are these beginning and ending areas with, a little too little texture to them. But that's okay. We can see the elevator. We can get on the elevator. And we can rise. And every space in the game is modeled in Blender and is actually, contiguous. This room is the only exception. It doesn't really make physical sense with the rest of the game, but I tried to at least approximate it. So we're going to come out on this door here. Right? This was the very first pickup we had. We came around this corner. Honestly, this is a game I might try to put more work into because it's cool. Kind of. Or I put a lot of work into it. I don't know. As I was saying before, the carpets and vines in this room are part of the static geometry, which means you can walk into them. I don't know how easy it is to notice that, but all of the vines except this one, which is a placed asset in Godot, are geometry. So you can, walk into those if you could get up there. Anyways, we cleared that stage. We've got our 3 guns. We've got dash and glide. That means we can get into the final room of the game. So I'm going to cross into this room, take a moment to think if there's anything else I'd like to tell you about this game before we go into our boss fight. I don't know. There's some interesting menu stuff, maybe. That icon, it's under my cursor here when I unpause. That's a dash icon. So you dash, it goes red, it flashes white for a moment to tell you it's recharged, and then you're recharged. Oh, quality of life thing. When you land from a jump, dash always recharges. But if you're on the ground and you dash, it doesn't recharge for a fifth of a second or so. I kind of noticed I would take bits of geometry like this and just outset them from the level a little bit and texture them differently, and I think it gave a nice, like, broken space look for very little effort. Anyways, none of this game is really meant to look good, so don't overthink that. I've never shown reloading or death, so maybe I'll go die to the boss really. Ooh, okay, so we gotta progress, we platform on these. Oh, they're scannable, they have a joke. Please open. Okay. This room was nice because it was a shared effort where I built the, like, room shell, essentially, right? I built this outline in Blender, and the idea was that, like, it needed to, like, get away from... Physically, there's a hallway right above that, and so it needed to, like, shift out a little bit, and then, like, go up in order to not intersect where other parts of the game would physically be. And so, like, I built this shell, but then Tyler was able to, like, he built these platform assets, he used these assets that I built in Blender and, like, put together the actual little puzzle here. So, like, this was a nice example of, like, working together to build a space. And so the way that this is meant to work is, one, you can't do that platforming sequence without glide, because you can't get from that, that corpse box, whatever it is, to the next one unless you can glide. Then you can make it up to this thing. And then you can't get over here without both a glide and a dash. So you've got this organic gating happening, right? Where the player can't move through this room until they can glide and dash. And then they can get up here and see what comes next. The only thing is, you can make this jump with only a glide. You have to, like, run up the pillar and then, like, skid along. I couldn't do it. None of the developers could do it. A friend of ours, who's crazy but also amazing, could do it. He was our, like, how quickly can I break your game tester? And it was quick. Well, it wasn't that quick, actually. There was a lot of times we stymied him and it felt great. But he ultimately made it around this and was able to pull off the, like, 5-minute speed run. Anyways, I'm opening... Oh god, it's there. I'm gonna die to the boss. Actually, that's gonna take too long. I'm just gonna go jump off a ledge. So we're just gonna go over here. If you look over... We just went down this elevator, and there should be some room over here, right? That, like, the elevator led to. But that has been unloaded, right? As we came up the elevator, that got unloaded. So there's nothing there. Also, bullets aren't garbage collected ever. Well, when rooms are loaded, they get garbage collected. But otherwise, those bullets are just going to fly forever. So, what was I trying to get at? Right. If you jump off the stage, there's sometimes level down there, and sometimes there's not. So how do I know when you're out of bounds? And basically every level has a life zone around, right? There's a level bounds box. And once you exit the bounds box, you have 5 seconds before you will die. And that bounds box is also used to unload a level. So if you go through a door, we know that we can unload the previous level once you've exited its bounds. Anyways, I'm going to jump. So you'll be able to see for a second, cutely, there's the elevator shaft. But it was 5 seconds, my health dropped, and I, sadly perished. I can go to the main menu, actually. That works. And we can re-enter from here to the throne room. Every room is named, but there's only save points in a few. What the fuck? This game wasn't that buggy when I released it. Someone must have changed it. That's a joke. No one changed it. The game is just buggy. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say... I mean, obviously quit works. Menu stuff works how you'd expect. Notice, like, there's a lot of little things happening here, right? The health bar actually animates to fill. The health... When you pick up a health drop, your screen flashes green. When you're shot by an enemy, your screen flashes red. Like, we really made a bit of an effort to communicate to the player what's going on. Even little things like, when a bullet hits a wall, it stops colliding so you can't walk into it, but it takes a moment to fade out. That just makes it feel a little bit better. And obviously this bullet has its own thing going on. And like the bullets, you're seeing the back of it here, but you can get next, like there's a lot of little things happening. So you can like shoot and then run to the side, and you'll see the side of the bullet. Which isn't really so important with the bullets, but they use the same system the enemies use, so the enemies can have a front, back, and sides. And yeah, it's just kind of neat. I'm gonna go fight the boss, and then we'll break into the code. Oh, the other enemy name was Gordon. Are those turrets you've been seeing with the big Lego man hands are called Gordons, which is because when they move, they like to stay far away from you, but they check line of sight to make sure they can actually shoot you. So they'll move until just a little bit of their face is around a corner. And in honor of my roommate's cat, who is named Gordon, who will sneak up behind you and only put his face around a corner just enough to see you with one eye, we've named these robots that behave the same way Gordon. And truly in honor of Gordon the cat, we made a bigger, worse version of Gordon called the Gordon. And when I cross through this door, you'll meet him. You can actually see his little ears right there. I'm going to turn down the music, but we found some great Creative Commons licensed tunes for this fight. There's the Gordon. He's big. He looks just like my roommate's cat, but more cyborg, and he's here to destroy you. Anyways, he's very fast. He's inspired by a cat and a bug. There was a bug where the Gordons would get faster every time they had to retreat from you. So it was the like fast boss bug essentially. And so we liked the behavior where he would like you can't see him and then he'll pop out from behind the corner incredibly quickly. And it worked pretty well for a boss fight, so we kind of stuck with it. But I'm about to cheese the boss to death, which is pretty easy to do because I have little health left. And I kind of need to. So we're just gonna kill him the very easy way using the stun weapon. So, oh, I never talked about this. This gun is it's your radar gun. It scans enemies, but when it hits the enemy, it stuns them for 5 seconds. Doesn't do any damage, but it applies this stun effect, and for 5 seconds they can't move, and then the stun will fade off. And so I'm just going to keep him stunned. Oh no. So, the cheese. Take Gordon to the cheese factory. And those yellow bubbles are... Damn it. There he is. Poor kitty. And then he dies, and that triggers this final dialogue where the scientist in charge recognizes that we are in fact the creator of this facility, and we express our complete disinterest in helping to enact the plan we once long ago forged to conquer the galaxy using mummies. So we, I don't know, narratively destroy the facility's owner, and the ship reminds us that the game is over because, you know, meta fourth wall breaking humor is the best. Everyone loves it. Alright, so that was the playthrough of Tombworld. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative for you. In the next video, I'm going to actually open up the Godot editor, and we're going to look at the architecture of the Tombworld project, and then we're going to dive into a couple of features of Tombworld and how they were implemented. I hope you'll stick around and watch the next video. Thanks for watching this far. Have a great day.